Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name's Jenelle Riley. I'm so happy to welcome you to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation conversation with Hayley Atwell. Whether sporting a corset in period films like The Duchess or Brideshead Revisited, or kicking ass as Agent Peggy Cartier, this is an actress I love to see on screens and on stage. You can currently catch her sublime work in the critically acclaimed BBC miniseries Howard's End on Starz. Please welcome Hayley Atwell.
Put that there.
Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to America.
Pleasure, thank you. I'm half American.
Right, your dad.
So, yes, despite the accent, I've got American citizenship, which I'm very proud of.
And you spent summers in America, right?
In Kansas City,
oh, wow,
growing
that's
up.
So interesting.
Yeah, and of course, Casey, fantastic. And I found when I got there, I became more British, because that was kind of like an added currency, my popularity. And it was great. And then when I come back to school in September in London, of course, I'd have a little bit of an American twang, because I'd been in the States where my dad's from. I was such a little actress, kind of so chameleonic, completely dependent upon my environment. Like, what skills can I use to get myself popular?
Wherever you went, you could be exotic.
I suppose so, or just kind of an outsider.
Yeah,
It's the thing I do find about being an actor. I wasn't a showy kid. I wasn't a very confident kid. Very sensitive, quite introverted, only child. But I found that kind of outsider, observant quality served me well a bit later on.
Oh, sure.
And weirdly found that actors that whose work I tended to follow tended to be slightly more introverted people in real life,
really?
Which was kind of a bit of a revelation. I just thought all actors were, the life and soul of a party, and that wasn't always the case.
No, I can assure you it is not. I've lived with my fair share of actors. I am curious though, because you were born and raised mostly in England, but you didn't have like family in the business. When did you first, kind of stumble upon acting?
Well, I think it was my mum always used to take me to the theatre. I mean, luckily being brought up in the centre of London and having a theatre being so accessible and affordable back then, anyway, that it was possible to go to the theatre above a pub or a community centre, or of course the West End, and get standby tickets or whatever. And I found from, I think, quite an early age, that experience of going into an environment where you're strangers pretty much, and the lights go down and everyone gets very quiet and it's all very intense. And then for however long you're taken on this journey with people on stage who you don't know, but by the end of it, they've in some way in that moment changed you, or had an experience of something, a connection of something, whether you've been moved or you've been kind of enraged by something, your mind's been open to something. And I just thought that there was such magic in it. I didn't know what my place in it could be. I thought that, especially in particular, the women that I would see on stage seemed to be these kind of fully formed, extraordinary powerhouses that were able to convey an emotion to a stranger that makes you feel that you're in some way part of this journey, this imaginative world. And so I think it just kind of appealed to that in me. I think both my parents were very into theatre as a kind of, I suppose, in some ways, a spiritual form. There's something quite magical about it, something kind of otherworldly that I think that drew me to it, and it just never left.
Do you remember some of those early plays that had an impact on you, or some of the actors that you first saw?
Oh gosh, so many. So I remember seeing, when I was 11, I think, seeing Ray Fiennes in Hamlet in the West End.
Oh, wow.
And I think he's already on stage when the audience come in, and he's got his back to the audience and he's wearing this like leather coat. He's got this kind of long hair. My mum was a huge Ray Fiennes fan at the time. That was kind of, I think, particularly a standout point. But then also a lot of Theatre de Complicité's work, Simon McBurney, so Street of Crocodiles and Mnemonic, and things like The Tiger Lilies doing Shock-Headed Peter, and Cloud Street at the National Theatre. These are kind of literally just coming to mind. I haven't kind of practiced. I haven't rehearsed any of this, but just gosh. And then seeing, I suppose, Fiona Shaw on stage, and Juliet Stevenson and Helen McCrory, Of course, Judi Dench, going up to Stratford and seeing shows at the RSC, and feeling that it was very much part of the British heritage and the culture, and I felt there was some kind of connection to the past, and what great playwrights and of course Shakespeare had given us was this vocabulary of trying to explore the human condition that still translates 400 years later. So yeah.
Was there a moment when you said, like, I want to do this, or I can do this, or were you just enjoying it?
I still don't know if I can. I have many moments of really wondering. I think that seems to be the case for a lot of people in the industry,
sure.
And I think a healthy amount of self-doubt is good. It's always, you know, if you come out fully formed out of drama school going, I'm going to make a profound contribution to the arts. You're probably not. You know, you're probably not.
Get ready for me.
It was, the drama school was great in that way, because I was so shy and I didn't know if I could do it. And I worked really hard, and graduating drama school felt like the beginning of what is now for me less of a career and more of an apprenticeship. And a feeling of, yeah, very much so. And I think every time I start a job, I'm not sure what I'm doing. And it requires something else, a different either preparation, or you're working with someone else who's got a very, you know, different way from working as a previous director did, or another actor who might have a very specific process different to your own. You're constantly having to remain present to the circumstance you find yourself in, which is why I don't have a particular technique, a kind of list of things I do to get ready. It completely depends upon the project itself.
I was actually curious about that, because I read in an interview that the actual terminology is you were offered entry to Oxford University, and you were going to study theology and philosophy, but you think you purposely botched your entrance. Is it an exam or?
You're offered. I mean, yeah, you're offered a conditional offer based on examinations and predicted grades, and 3 days of harrowing interviews where you go and stay up there and you do like rounds of it and exams, and then you get a conditional offer. It's not even a like, well done, you're in. It's, if you get these results in your exams, you're in. And I didn't want it. I didn't want it because I thought it would have been a waste of a place at this the best university in the world, how I considered it back then. And I also knew that I don't think I would have lasted 3 years doing something that was going to be a very incredibly difficult, hard-working time, when really I knew I was wanting to go into theatre anyway. So it just seemed, I felt slightly pushed into it from my school, going, you've got an analytical brain. Let's go and study Descartes. And yeah.
Did you knowingly botch it, or is it upon reflection you realize, like, I didn't really work for it?
It's a bit of both. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing at 18. I just don't know what I'm doing now. I mean, you know, it's only in retrospect you go, oh, that was an interesting choice I made there.
Yes, a choice.
Yeah.
And then I heard that you spent some time traveling the world, and you worked for a casting director?
Yeah, so this was, I think, a really useful thing to do quite early on, which was I was a runner for a casting director, so I would, you know, make the tea, and I got lucky enough to be able to help him audition actors coming in. So I'd sit in these audition rooms, and I would read opposite an actor coming in to read for a part, and I'd often be sat next to the casting director and a producer and a director of whatever the project was. And I would always be really surprised with the feedback once the actor had left the room. It's great because you get to know, like,
oh yeah, tell us.
Behind the scenes.
What are they really saying?
Well, yeah, what they're really saying is going, I think she should have brown hair. Either someone has done something incredible or brilliant or unique or something so different to what feels like is just an obvious choice on the page. And, you know, I remember a couple of people leaving the room and I'm going like, oh my God, well, they've got it. I mean, I would have offered, let's just do it now. Let's offer it to them now. We should have filmed it. I mean, it's in the can. And it would be something so unbelievably mundane or nothing personal to that person, and they would often go, wow, they were so impressive. Anyway, and then it would be someone else. And so I think what it did is gave me a taster of knowing that the audition process is not personal. And if you go in prepared, then you know that you've done what you could do, and then it's out of your hands. And I think it helped for me to kind of be able to endure relentless rejection without wanting to harm myself.
I mean, people say that, but it's such a valuable insight into how the business works. And we're constantly told it's not personal, but it just feels personal.
Of course it is. I mean, I think it's, you know, I'm happy that we can get into it here because you guys will all understand this. There's obviously things I wouldn't want to say in certain publications that would make me sound kind of pretentious or like really nerdy. But you know, the truth that I think to be an actor is really brave.
So brave.
And even, you know, when they talk about public speaking being now still is the number one or number two biggest fear for people, and yet, you know, we've chosen to do this as a profession and to put ourselves out there to expose ourselves in some way. And there's, you know, many theses of why we do that, and is it, you know, is it the love we longed to have as a child, or is it just that we're kind of narcissistic? I mean, it doesn't matter. The point is, the act itself of doing that can at times be absolutely terrifying. And I do remember having blocks, especially early on, of in some way not connecting to either the director I was working with in an audition or the material itself, but really struggling in an audition and feeling terrified that this would be the end of it, of going, if I can't break through this, if I can't get a job, then I'm going to have to figure out something else to do. And it was the only thing I ever wanted to do. And that's really scary. It's high stakes. I think it always is high stakes. And I still, when I meet actors who are incredibly famous and successful, and yet when you get into it, there is still that level of, I don't know when I'm going to work again next, or I don't know whether or not I'm just taking roles that are given to me because it's putting me in a comfort zone, and I'm actually not really offering anything new to the world. I'm basically doing a repetitive repeat of something that's worked and that's allowed me to pay the bills, which absolutely is a valid reason to do it. But you know, if you're wanting to be an artist and you're wanting to evolve, and you want to kind of be next to the people that you admire because it awakens and stimulates you in terrifying and thrilling ways, then you're constantly on the edge of pushing yourself out of that comfort zone into territories which can be emotionally very exposing and make you feel vulnerable, and having to pick yourself up after that experience, knowing that people might not read it, people might not want it, and you know, or worse, people might ridicule it and mock it, and it's why do we do it? It's insane. It's insane.
It is so brave. It's serious. I know people who have, you know, given up on acting because they can't handle, and auditioning is so different than actually performing, so it just feels foreign to sort of be in a room, you know, with one person.
Yeah, I still struggle with auditions because the format feels like nothing to do with what actually happens when you get the job, and theatre as well as TV and film, but especially if there is that sense of I don't how do I say this? I remember kind of starting out going, I went to a couple of auditions and the experience was so horrid that I felt it was actually detrimental, and if I carried on putting myself through that in that system in that way, I knew I wouldn't be getting the jobs anyway, and I'd become resentful to the process. And I loved the art of it and the artistry of it, that I was like, how do I allow, you know, I want to get to the art, but I have to go via this kind of slightly cold corporate world of this cattle call feeling, and you walk into an audition and everyone's just a better looking version of you, and they've gone to the hairdressers, and you're like, I'm playing a police officer. Why have you gone and gotten yourself looking like a little sexy lady? Like it just, you know, and you know, that, and the atmosphere in an audition when you can pick up on other people's nervousness, or like, oh, you're here again, so hi, and you kind of sense that there's like, and as actors, we're so aware of the nuance of subtext within an environment. You know, I felt that my sensitivity as a kid was detrimental, but now I see it as a gift that I've had to use, but also take care of, because I can walk into a room and feel very aware of the atmosphere that I'm picking up, and I'm observant of people, so I can tell if what the agenda, if there is an agenda, not necessarily what it is, but if there's an edge to something, and that's as an actor fantastic, because it means you can play subtext, that's where all the good stuff, all the great juicy bits happen, not in what is said, but what is not said, but in doing that, it just meant that if I went into an audition and I felt intimidated by the environment, I found it very hard to emotionally open myself to it. And that was, especially early on, something I really struggled with. And so I kind of was bold enough to make some kind of choices about personal boundaries about what I would do and what I wouldn't do. And I found in doing that, it wasn't like I was, like if there was some auditions, I thought, you know, I went and auditioned with that person, or I'm aware of that material, and I know I don't necessarily seem to have a voice yet or any kind of leverage here to have an opinion, but I do have one, and I don't want to do this. And I wouldn't do that because I knew going into something that would put me in an environment that would make me clam up. I knew it was going to be detrimental later on to, you know, what I felt I knew I wanted to give. Feels all kind of cryptic what I'm saying, but I'm hoping you're kind of following me a little bit. But I do feel that, you know, there is this sense when actors especially come out of drama school, and because everyone loves it so much and it's such a passion for people, and yet the stakes are so high because so many people love it, and so there aren't as many parts, and there's all this competition and all that kind of fear surrounding it, that it's, you know, you've got to tread carefully. But I felt that the only way I was going to last is if I was going to have some kind of dignity and self-respect around how, you know, how I wanted to work within an audition. And if I felt bullied, or if I felt that person, I was just one of many, you know, if I felt invisible in an audition, I'd kind of politely say thank you and leave, or just not go. And actually realizing that in my powerlessness, I was still able to have some sort of a voice. It made me feel quite empowered, and I started to have more confidence in my abilities to communicate. Wow. And to be honest, because that's ultimately, isn't it, what it is some of the greatest performances that you see are performances that are not clever, and they're not technically brilliant necessarily, some are, but there's just honesty there. There's a human connection that we relate to, no matter what the backdrop of the story is or what the circumstance of those characters' lives are. It's that connection that I want, that I see in other performances. I go, that to me is what this is all about. And when I perform myself, I'm hoping to have those moments of connection with the audience as well, where you're kind of crossing those barriers of kind of time and space and circumstance and society, and just as human to human, just having a shared moment and having glimpses of that which are so tender and so joyful. You go, that's what I'm in it for. Yeah. You are way ahead of me, because it took me a long time only in the last 2 years, honestly, to sort of realize the power of saying no, of being able to say, like, no, I don't want to do this, or I'm going to withdraw from this. How old were you when you sort of realized you could do that? It's an ongoing thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you don't know until you're testing it out here and there. And I didn't have I think it's a big conversation. I think one thing that I think I feel quite strongly about is it's possible to have a good time and be really nice to people, and
what a concept, right? Yeah.
And do really good work. And I remember having dinner with Meryl Streep.
I'm sorry, who?
Sorry, if I just
Meryl Streep.
pick that up for me. I'm just sorry.
The actress Meryl Streep, the 3-time Academy Award winner.
She's a goddess, really, isn't she? And I came away from that day. It was a social kind of dinner. She wasn't on. She wasn't working. You know, it was a private thing. But I came away going, if Meryl Streep can be that present, gracious, chilled out, down to earth, interested in the people that she was having dinner with, there's no excuse for bad behaviour. And I'd seen glimpses of it, especially in film, especially with younger actors. Hate to say it, more with Americans than English. I think English, there's a bit of a reverence for the work and less for ourselves. We take the work seriously, but not ourselves. And so the drama school training is very much about the discipline of the craft, rather than the need for kind of one's own status or celebrity, I suppose. That's just a very general observation. Horrible thing to say, but anyway, it's my experience. It was my truth, it's my experience.
I have no trouble believing it.
But noticing that I find that some of the best work happens when the room is, the creativity comes from being relaxed. When you see kids playing and having a good time, and how free their imagination is to come up with all sorts of extraordinary, impossible things. because they're kind of relaxed within their bodies and they don't feel judged or self-conscious. And I find doing that in an ensemble in theatre, or especially in Howard's End, we did that a lot because we were kind of on the same page with that it is possible just to have a really great working environment and produce good work. And when that was on offer to me all of a sudden, and that comes from time of watching other people. You know, one of the things I've done from day one is just, if I see someone doing something I like, I steal it. Shamelessly. I might even just repeat exactly what they've said, the way that they've said it, if I think that's fab, you know, and that's what we do. That's what, you know, we relate to each other and we steal off each other. But I think I kind of it just meant that if I was in an environment that I remember being younger and feeling like I could allowed myself to be pushed around a little bit, or allowed myself to be in a slightly kind of hierarchy of a set or whatever, that I just, now that I'm older, I don't want that to be the case for me, for anyone working with me, and particularly younger people coming into this industry. So yeah, it's a big conversation. I'm kind of going all about the houses around with it, but
no,
yeah.
I don't like this idea that you have to suffer for art.
No,
It
this is
makes
the
me
thing.
crazy.
Absolutely. I thought if I was going to put my own mental health at risk and all my own personal relationships, take my work home with me and suffer in silence because I was so deep and meaningful, that I thought that was like, you know,
You're an artiste.
The opposite.
Yeah.
The opposite. And when you see other people do it, kind of having a laugh, having a family, having a personal life where they can shut off. Mm-hmm. Talking about the bloody industry for 1 second, or their art for 1 second, and just were present in the environment that they found themselves in, offset, the good work was happening, and that was a relief. And I don't know if you guys relate to that, but that feeling of like you commit to it so much, and in drama school it's also consuming, that you just all want to be so kind of tortured. And then when I discovered like a well-adjusted person happened to be brilliant, I was so angry. I was like, yeah, but they must go home and cry. And then I'd be like, yeah, but I'm the one going home and crying because I'm giving myself a really hard time because I'm like taking myself so seriously.
I mean, there's that old, Laurence Olivier to Dustin Hoffman.
Try acting.
Yeah, it's called acting.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it shouldn't be so torturous.
I don't think it should be torturous. I especially don't think it should be torturous for other people. I think that's really unprofessional, actually. And I think that we have been in a very just very suspicious kind of and dangerous belief system that the way that some actors treat other actors because they're going through their own process is behavior that no other industry would put up with. And why should we? It's disgraceful, I think. I think when having your process is fine, but when your process interferes with someone else's ability to just get on with their job, then it's your problem, and you're not an actor.
Or a director who thinks they have to abuse a performance out of someone.
Completely, I completely agree with that. I have no interest in that. Yeah.
But it seems you went to Guildhall.
I did, yeah.
School of Music and Art, is that correct?
Drama, yeah. Drama, yeah.
And you mentioned, did they teach a specific method, or just a whole bunch of ones, and you kind of came up with your own?
No, so, but Guildhall, Lambda, RADA, Central, they. Drama Centre maybe less so, but the kind of, say, the main kind of London-based drama schools don't tend to have a particular process, but you will study Stanislavski, you will study the greats, the auteurs, the different techniques. So you'll do like Laban, you'll do clowning, you do iambic pentameter, beating out the iambic till you're blue in the face, and also a lot of movement-based work from France, from like Jacques Lecoq, and what else? And improvisation comedy, and then you study a lot of classical plays, and you create devised pieces. And it's a very intense 3-year course, but the idea is that over those 3 years, you're getting a sense and a taste of what is out there, to then hopefully give you some foundation for which to build your own process on, and taking a little bit from here and there. So there were some people that really responded to Stanislavski's method and found that they took that within them with all the things that they then did for the rest of the course. And then you had other people who were using more Laban techniques and that were much more movement based, and other people that were more kind of analytical and wanting to go into kind of making up the past of their character. And then you have techniques like given circumstances and magic if and all this sort of thing. And you're kind of it's just like this kind of amazing selection of treats in a huge box of chocolates. And you just kind of pick and choose what works for you and what you like.
That sounds like so much better than insisting on one specific method. It was for everyone.
Yeah, it was for me, and I think sometimes there can be a pretension around it. I mean, I know some people it works for and they need it, and that's fantastic. I'm not that person. I think for me practicing being present with another human being is the simplest explanation of what I think acting is. And in that presence, you're learning how to listen to each other and how to interact. That for me is all acting is. But practicing that takes a long time and it's really hard. Yeah.
We actually have a question from the audience from Danielle. Hey, you have very nice handwriting. Wants to know what's something you've learned over the course of your career that would have been helpful to have known when you were first starting?
That it's not personal, I suppose. To relax. I think learning how to relax is kind of key. Thinking that if I had lots of tension in my body and I had gave myself a hard time, that I would create something fabulous to watch or something dramatic. But I found that the opposite was true. That if I was relaxed, then it was more likely that the audience could see and hear and feel and take in what I was saying and sharing with them. I remember once at drama school, the teachers, I was saying something like, what's my character like feeling here? And he was just like, well, I don't know, it doesn't matter. It's what the audience should be feeling is the question you should be asking. What do you want the audience to experience in this moment? And actually taking the focus off my own inner process and more about making this a relationship was a great way of kind of coming out of my own mind, my own kind of inner landscape, because that's what it is ultimately, I think, isn't it? Acting with you're trying to take the inner landscape of a writer and have it sit within you so that you understand it and you connect with it emotionally and mentally and physically, but then ultimately you find a way to express it that then the audience can take something from. And you're, for want of a better word, you're a vessel. You're a channel of the truth. You can, that it's something that you're learning to live through you rather than for you.
Kind of a strange question, but I was curious, is it different auditioning in England versus America, or are they pretty similar at the end of the day?
Yeah, it depends on what it's for, really. I imagine it's quite similar, and it's pretty straightforward. You have some, like theatre auditions, they will want you to prepare a piece, and then obviously if it's film or TV, sometimes you get the sides as you walk in. I mean, my first film was a Woody Allen film, and I was given a paragraph of text, and it was something along the lines of, my car's broken down, can you help? Do you have a spare tyre I could borrow? And I walked it, and I was like, what's going on? And there was no circumstance around. There wasn't a sense of, well, who is she? And is she trying, what does she want from him? Has she really broken down? Or is this a ploy to get you and McGregor? I mean, what's going on? Are these just kind of euphemisms or metaphors?
Yeah.
And it was literally just like, no, just say the lines. He wants to know how you sound, how your voice sounds.
Really?
And you go, oh, it's okay. All right, and the other thing I think I kind of learned is to not overcomplicate anything, to just do what is asked of you in that moment. Just say the line, say the line and allow the audience to hear that line. And knowing that when you're going in to do an audition, not having to give them more than they're asking of you, but just make a simple choice and deliver it.
So upon graduation, you started working in the industry pretty fast.
Yeah.
I think within a year you booked Cassandra's Dream.
Yeah, so I was, I think 2 weeks into graduation, I booked my first play, which was Prometheus Bound with David Oyelowo, who remains a very important.
That's your
person
first
in my
play,
life. Yeah.
and your first movie is a Woody Allen movie. And no, I mean these are.
But you never. I mean, but it's.
Yeah.
Do you know what's kind of odd is, and we'll talk about the the acting and the craft of it, but how someone's life is, we see it from the outside, is so different. Like my experience back then was, it was like that there was this girl called Hayley Atwell. She kind of booked quite a few things, and she looked like she's having a good old time. I was like, whoever she is, she's very lucky, and I'm very jealous of her, because this person who was experiencing it from the inside out was overwhelmed and was nervous and was like, this is great, but if it's happening too soon, does that mean that I'm just going to be found out? I haven't earned this yet. Oh my God! And then is it because of my face? And people are just going to see she's like a flash in the pan, like just neurosis, just and I think that's something to we live in a society that celebrates success, it celebrates beauty, it celebrates money. And it doesn't seem to be okay to have any other emotions apart from absolute kind of confidence and gratitude when those things seemingly come your way for a moment. But this is all just kind of a temporary, very glossed over kind of sound bites of life. And the experience of it was, I wanted to be good at what I did, and I knew at that stage I wasn't. I was too new. It was too much to learn. I had no idea what I was doing. I was only just understanding what hitting a mark was, and what a camera angle would pick up, and therefore favouring one side of the actor's face rather than the other, because the camera was there, rather than the little technical thing. I had so much to learn that I was just like a rabbit in headlights, I think. And I just wanted to be good, and I was embarrassed that I wasn't yet. And I knew that I had a long way to go, and that I still do. But I was doing it publicly. I was doing it in front of people. That was really scary, I'd had the safety of drama school for 3 years, where you can make all these mistakes and take 10 steps back and only 1 step forward. And then to be given those opportunities so early on are great, but they can also, there is always a cost. Nothing is ever, I don't think, free. Every kind of experience will be a multi-layered one for you, given your level of maturity or your circumstance.
Did you get an agent while you were in school?
I did. I played Hedda Gabler in my 3rd year.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was actually great. It unlocked something in me, because I think up until that point, I'd always been, my teachers said, you're very good at being directed. Like I was a bit of a blank canvas, and I could take direction really well, but I didn't often know how to come up with a choice first.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, and I had a teacher, when I was leaving, she said, just know that your strengths have really come from your ability to take direction, but it means that you're only ever going to offer what the director is asking you to do. And when you go into an audition, they're not saying, this is how you do it. They're going, show me. So come up with something. And that was quite scary. But what was great playing Hedda Gabler was, she was a messy, ugly, really disturbed character. And I had spent 2.5 years at drama school at that point wanting to be a really good actor. I was practically a children's presenter, which is great, but it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. And I was always, they would say, like, you're very good at presenting a character to us, Hayley, but we want to see your kind of, we want to see something messy and real and kind of, a bit darker. And I think with Hedda Gabler, it was, I think it helped me access those sides of the spectrum of human emotion that before, especially as a young girl and wanting to be nice, didn't feel like I was allowed at that point or I didn't allow myself to explore in a safe environment. But one of the great things about acting and doing these plays is that it gives structure to very messy emotions and confusing emotions, and it gives a safety of the beginning, a middle, and an end, knowing that you can do things and say things and experience things on a stage or on camera that on cut or when the curtains go down, everyone's going to applaud you for it. They're not going to go, she's crazy, we're not inviting her to the next party. You're safe, you're safe. You can have those big, epic meltdowns and then be like, and congratulated for it. Going, it was so convincing how crazy you are. Like, I know.
That's such a great role.
Hedda was it was a great role, and I really loved her. I loved how trapped she is. She's bored out of her mind, and feels kind of this resentment to this this world telling her how lucky she is, and she's married this man, and she's got this house, and she's got this, and she's got that, and she's dying inside. She just, you know, it's not who she is, and that feeling of that disconnect between one's own inner landscape versus the reality of their life or the other people's supposed vision of what that life is. That to me was something that I could later, you know, I later certainly resonated with.
That's why I'm curious, would you ever want to revisit that role?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I love all those, you know, I love to do Therese Racan and Lady Macbeth and Heather and all those darker roles. I feel freer there actually. I feel, yeah.
Every 10 years you should do Hedda Gabler and see how it fits into your life.
Good. Imagine. Who else would come and see it?
We can do it right here. We have 8 by 10 feet.
Has anybody got a gun?
In LA, yes. But so that led you to getting an agent?
Yeah, so I got an agent and I went out to audition pretty much every day after that, and I hated it. And I've been rejected from more things than I've gotten, even though I've worked a lot. There's been, for every job that I've gotten, there's been 5 or 6 things I didn't get. That's the reality of it. That's part of my story, and that's something that I embrace and I make space for, of knowing what that feels like and continue to feel. But I was lucky enough to get Prometheus Bound, the part of Io, and she had been she'd been turned into a cow by Zeus. So I was like, right, okay, wow, okay, how am I going to do that? And we created these with bandages, like I bound my hands. They kind of looked like hooves, and worked with David in this tiny theatre in the West End, which is actually closed down now, the Sound Theatre. And he was chained and did his whole performance with closed eyes. Until the last bit, it was just like the light shines on his face and he very slowly opens his eyes. And he blew my mind because he was so clear and articulate and intelligent in his choices and kind to me, and took me under his wing. And I loved the epic. I loved the big stories, the big emotions. We had this kind of belief that Io had been, she'd been sexually abused, and that she had been, and that she was therefore suffering from, she had kind of like a psychological break. She'd had a breakdown, and so she didn't see herself the way she actually was until she meets Prometheus, and he kind of gives her some sort of purpose. It was a very intense experience. It was, I think, 6 weeks on, but that to me that's where I came from and what I love doing.
And again, if someone as talented as David Oyelowo can be nice, one of the nicest people in the world,
so lovely.
Everyone can,
yeah,
I feel.
Yeah.
Did you work with him again, or?
No, we didn't. I mean, we now have dinners. We hang out as mates.
With Meryl Streep?
Meryl and I wish, my little fantasy head. Yeah.
Another film you did early on was Brideshead Revisited.
Yeah.
Which is such a good adaptation. And again, I never believe anything I read on the internet, but I think I read an interview where you said the studio pressured you to lose weight.
Well, God, it's such a boring conversation, that. Like, I'm so bored of it. Like, I'm an actor, I'm not a model, never wanted to be. I think there was some conversation about it. So I said no. Emma said, if it's brought up again, I'll take it to the press. And we got on with our job.
Emma Thompson intervened, is what I understand.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's someone good to have on your side.
Yeah. But what she was great at doing is she'd get hampers of cheese and wine and send it to the accounts department, saying, I know we never get to see you because you're in those windowless rooms in the kind of far end of the where we're shooting. But thank you so much for everything that you're doing, and thank you for paying us. And it was the camaraderie that, of course, would have come from theatre background, the ensemble taking care of each other, and you're kind of all in it together. And Emma was great at doing that. And if we'd overrun, she'd order pizzas for the whole crew. And she knew everyone's name, what they did, what their wives were called, what their husbands were called. If it was their birthday, she'd get a cake for them. And then just be brilliant on action. And I was like, oh, this is like, there's what you do between action and cut, but there's also all this other stuff of how to it's a full-time job. Working with an ensemble.
And again, if Emma Thompson can be nice, no one else has any excuse. There was another movie that I really noticed you in, which was The Duchess with Keira Knightley. I am so in love with that movie, and you earned a British Independent Film Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. That was it's a fantastic role in a big, beautiful costume piece. Did you find that it had a positive impact on your career, or?
Yeah, I mean, that came out of, because I'd worked on an adaptation of The Line of Beauty in Alan Hollinghurst book for the BBC, and the director of that was Saul Dibb, who then cast me in The Duchess. And the part I played in that was quite a dark character. She's quite manipulative, quite damaged, and she's manic depressive. And he'd said, I think along the lines that kind of I was getting a sense that directors kept him saying to me, "You're really good at thinking on screen. There's a lot going on without you having to say anything." And I kind of was like, "Yeah, I'm terrified. I'm going, what do I do?" But it's a bit like, when Lauren Bacall, she talks about how, that first when you see her, she's got the head down, and we're like, wow, it's such a powerful entrance. And she was like, it was the only way I could stop my kind of whole face from vibrating with nerves, was just to like, and all these things that she did to make herself feel calm was in fact, looks just like she's making some amazing character choice. It's like, it's not good. But yeah, so The Duchess was a similar thing. She's a woman who steals her best friend's man, essentially. But there's a kind of a love triangle in that, and essentially there's nothing that she won't do for her children. And by having a relationship with the Duke, he will grant her access to her children. That's kind of where it came from. So I think quite early on I was interested in quite complicated characters. I mean, I'm also, the characters I grew up really loving or being mesmerized by were the slightly difficult ones, the kind of anti-heroes, the, like, I loved like Dead Man Walking and the short, the kind of like, how can there be redemption for a man that has done these awful things to someone? And yet it's calling on me to kind of expand my empathy or my ability to tolerate human beings in all their dark facets, and also think the earlier work of Lars von Trier, Breaking the Waves.
I just saw his new movie, so I'm with you.
I'm so sorry. I haven't seen it, but from things that he said are questionable, I think it post Me Too, you can't carry on like that. But Breaking the Waves, for example, being, I don't know if you guys know it, the very complicated story of a woman who is incredibly innocent and naive and marries this man who has an accident and says to her, "I want you to go out and sleep with men in the village and come back and tell me about it as a way that you and I can have some sort of a sexual relationship," because he was paralyzed. Mm-hmm. What a premise. You're like, but it's so tender and beautiful and plausible in a way, and I was left feeling so uncomfortable about my feelings around it that to me that's interesting to me, and that things that really challenge my moral compass a little bit, or Tyrannosaur, another one that Peter Mulligan did. Peter Mulligan and Paddy Considine wrote and directed it.
That's a rough one.
With Olivia Colman, that's really that tough stuff is kind of where I like to sit. Mm-hmm. It's richer for me.
Were you a Dancer in the Dark fan?
Yeah, I was.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Would you work with Lars von Trier?
Not now, no.
Yeah. If you could get in a time machine and go back to...
It's the great thing about kind of having a few years in this industry.
Yeah.
I mean, and just being like, no, not going to work with them again. And I'm fine with that. And because it used to be the case, I'd be like, oh, well, I'm just so grateful to be working. Thank you so much. That you'd put up with, or you'd feel like you would, and then kind of go, why? But why? But why? Why we don't have to do that to ourselves anymore? It's the joy of being able to learn that no is a complete sentence, or that you can see other people's pieces of work and go, with all due respect, that's not something that I feel like I should be contributing to.
You just said no is a complete sentence. Did you make that up, or is that an expression because I love it and I want to tattoo it?
Well, then I made it up.
Okay. I'm so stealing that. It's going right on my forearm next time you see me. Hayley Atwell.
Yeah.
I also think Lars von Trier hasn't made a good movie in many years, so I, wouldn't want to see them. But man, some of that stuff from like 10, 15 years ago was amazing.
And Dogville, those.
I actually love Dogville.
I think they're inventive and and you know, really wonderful. I mean, they're the kind of films that for me have been affecting. You know, I've not done many of those sorts of films at all.
That's true.
But they're, I think maybe the living in those kind of slightly messier worlds is something that I like. Yeah, creatively I'm into.
And I know you got to play a lot of messy characters on stage where there are such great roles for women.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to see you in A View from the Bridge, which is so interesting because I thought I was an Arthur Miller fan and I didn't know this play. I think in America it's not one that's taught.
Right,
Because it's problematic,
yeah,
so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful, you know, piece of work. You earned a Best Actress nomination for the Laurence Olivier Awards for that one, your first one. And I know you did Women Beware Women at the Royal National Theatre.
Royal Shakespeare Company.
Oh, you're right. Royal National Theatre was
so.
Major Barbara.
Yes, I did too. I did Man of Mode first, and then Major Barbara at the National Theatre, the Olivier stage. Yeah.
Were you thinking it would be mainly a stage career? Were these the?
I was hoping that it would involve a lot of stage. I still do. I did a play earlier this year, having not done a play for 5 years, which I couldn't believe had been that long, and I'm doing a play later on this year. And the thing I love about plays is you are they're really, really hard. But you know what's landed and what hasn't. There's no hiding.
Oh yeah.
So you know a performance can't be changed as it can be in the editing suite. You can't, you know, an editor can take your reaction from that take and then the delivery of that line from that, but then cut to that guy because you messed up that line a bit, and then come back to you for the end of the speech and make you look amazing.
Yeah.
Not that anyone's ever done that for me, but it's possible. But it's very much a director's medium in comparison to stage, which feels very much the writer and the actor's medium. And you get to know where your limitations lie, but also you get to learn how to use props, you know. And I felt that when we did Howard's End, each scene was directed like a play. So the crew left the set, and the director, Hetty MacDonald, had Kenny Lonergan's script, Ian Forster's book, and we figured out geographically where we wanted to be. So I knew Margaret was restless about something, so I thought, well, I'm going to stoke the fire over there on that line, flop onto the Shalong, read a book, can't read the book, put the book down. Helen's going to go and get that shawl over there. Tibby's going to play with the fossil collection over there, and then bang a few notes out on the piano, all at the same time as the scene is going on. And what I found that I learn on stage is how to use your body, use props that are that serve the subtext of the scene, and that also can be completely different to what the words are saying, which is so much more interesting than just reading out exposition and then your whole body saying what your voice is saying. So I can't explain, I'm not very articulate about it, but I just find, actually one thing I remember on the Duchess that Ray Fiennes taught me was, I remember Saul Dibb came up to me and said, I think the Duke said, can he be angry? Just, yeah, make him angry. And Rafe was like, well, what does that mean? He said, I can show you my anger by the way that I stir sugar into my tea, or the way that I throw a chair across a room, or the way that I don't say anything at all. But how does anger manifest itself? And I thought it was such a fantastic thing to say. And that's what I've done with stage work. I get the opportunity to, the arrangement of some flowers over here, you know Barbara is in a really foul mood, you know, or so much is being said in what she's doing upstage when she's not saying anything, and that's something that the theatre allows you to do because you have to fully inhabit that stage with your body and with the props, and it's just you're feeling so naked, and so you can also know when something hasn't landed, or you know when you said a line and it got a laugh, and so now you're just saying it for laughs,
right,
until everyone can tell, and so they stop laughing at you, and then you're having to just reel it in a bit. And then also when things go wrong on stage, I remember at the RSC, I was given this, it was a Jacobean tragedy, Women Beware Women, with the late great Tim Pickett-Smith and Penelope Wilton. And I walked on stage with this huge kind of dress that was kind of cobwebby. It was like loads of kind of different layers and chiffon. It was all like kind of matted, and she kind of run through this village in the rain in it. And she kind of turns up on stage kind of in a bit of a state. And I remember, as my first kind of, this was the Shakespeare Company, I was 24 years old. This was, you know, something I'd always wanted to be. Crucible was playing next door, Arthur Miller connection. And I walked up on stage, and actually it was just before I came on, and the actress in the other wing opposite looked down and went, I was like, oh, I don't, what do you do, what? And then I had to go on. So I went on and I did a bit. And then I looked down and I'd noticed that as I ran out of the dressing room to come down to the stage, my old gym bra attached itself to the dress, which really undermined my performance. Wow. But in that moment, I was going, oh my God, and without thinking, I just picked it up and I used it as if it was a handkerchief in the scene.
Wow.
I don't know who saw that, but it was just that moment of going, that's when character is revealed and you see what you're made of going, how do I do that? Or if you dropped a prop on stage, you go, how am I going to incorporate that? We all know what's happened here, but how do I not break that fourth wall? And it happens, so how can I use that? There's lots of kind of moments like that that kind of stuck with me of kind of quite defining moments, I suppose. I'm trying to think about other ones, but definitely the bra being attached to my dress.
Did people say anything? Do you think they noticed, or you so believably played it off?
Oh, I think they noticed. I think they know, but this is also what we love to see. I love it when I see an actor do something, you know, or drop something, whatever, and then they bring it back and they do something, and then you're like, what an amazing recovery! You know, that you're like, oh my God! It's so much better. It's not that the person falls; it's how they get back up. That's what we feel is triumphant. So, you know, we love seeing that, so I don't mind that. I remember actually seeing my dear friend Jodie Whittaker, who was in my year at Guildhall, who's now going to be the first female Doctor Who in the UK. And she's in Journeyman with Paddy Considine, his new film, and it's amazing. And she was always very good at that. And she was in Pericles at the Shakespeare's Globe with Mark Rylance. That was her first job out of Guildhall. Yeah.
You guys.
And so I went to see it. And the day that I went to see it, you know, summer's day, and of course there's no roof in the Shakespeare's Globe. And she's meant to come up from the sea as this kind of urchin, and she gets on stage and she says a line of like, will no one help me? Will no one save me? And she's saying it to like this ocean, and she's on this desert island. And just as she delivered that line, this low-flying plane comes over the roof of the Globe, and it's really, really loud. So she looks up, and the whole audience looks up, and she goes, oh God, yes! And she totally incorporated it into it as if they were there to save her, and she got this round of applause.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I was so joyful.
Yeah.
It's just so those moments where you know everyone's kind of in on the joke of it. It's so exciting.
By the way, when you did the Duchess, did you tell Ray Fiennes that you saw him as a young girl on stage?
Well, my mother certainly did.
Oh dear. Thanks, Mom.
I did. I get really shy about it. Like I get very shy when I meet actors who I admire, you know, whose work I admire, because it means so much to me to meet them. But also, I'd be devastated if they were like, oh God, you know. Like when I was a kid, like many theatre fans, I was a big Rocky Horror fan. And like my love for Tim Curry runs deep. Oh. Now, I also once saw an interview of him that he did like in the 80s. It's up on YouTube. You know, I really go into it when it comes to Rocky Horror. Like I'm like YouTubing 80s videos. And there was an interview where he goes, well, how do you feel when people talk about you? Like, you know, that's your definitive role of your entire career and stuff. And he goes, well, I handle it with a bemused tolerance. I thought that's such a great line, but it just meant that I couldn't now ever meet him and tell him I was a fan of that, because I knew I'd be hit with bemused tolerance. Yeah. And so I kind of get quite, you know, I get quite shy about that sort of thing. But also I find that actors really love it. You know, actors really, if they've moved you, and going up and saying, you know what, thank you, I love what you did there. It's, for the most part, people are still kind of touched by it, you know.
Well, I think especially with theater, because it doesn't have access to everyone. You can't, you know, Rocky Horror Picture Show, you can put on the DVD or, you know, turn on the TV, or even still go to theaters these days. Yeah. But yeah, when it's a theater performance and it's that, you know, ephemeral in the moment thing.
Yeah.
He's probably thrilled.
Yeah, exactly. It is something, I think also that the thing with theatre of going, it's never going to exist again in that moment.
Yeah.
Like every performance is going to be slightly different. The atmosphere is going to be different, the audience is going to be different. So it really is that elusive moment where you think, I was there, and I saw the night when this happened. Yeah, and I think that's kind of in a world where we love to record everything nowadays. There's something quite magical about that, having something that will never be seen again.
I went to see a play the night that a woman's cell phone went off, and it wouldn't stop. It went on for a really long time, and it was Daniel Craig and Hugh Jackman doing a two-hander, Steady Rain. Yeah. And I remember like meeting Daniel Craig and telling him, and it was, first of all, it was a great example of he incorporated into the character, because in character he told her to turn off his phone.
Yeah.
But it was like, there's something about like, he's like, oh, that specific night, I could tell you everything about that night.
Right, well, yeah.
Everything is so different.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd had people in A View from the Bridge, because it's obviously a text, it's for GCSE and A-level in the UK. So there's lots of students that would come in, and their reaction to the kiss, when Eddie kisses Rodolfo, and and talking through it, and phones going off and people eating, and you kind of go, wow, the TV generation thinks that they can't be heard or seen. Like, I'm here, I can see what you're doing. And there's this kind of, it's a weird thing, it's like, it's like watching two people on stage, or watching people in the audience when I'm on stage, and I can see what they're doing. I'm very much there, although I'm obviously in the scene. I remember in Dry Powder, this thing I did in London this year, there was a student, and he sat in the front row, and he spent the whole time with the text of the play.
No.
And he was reading in it. He was going. And you're like, oh God, he's testing me. Oh no, I've said there. And at one point, I kind of kept staring at him, going. and after each scene, all the actors backstage are going, that guy, it's so inappropriate. And of course, he didn't think it would be. And at the curtain call, I just kind of looked at him and I went. And I was like. Because it was really distracting,
oh my God.
And then one of the actors met him on the tube that night afterwards, and the guy was like, "Well, I didn't really know the play, and English isn't my first language, so I wanted to follow it." And the guy was like, the actor's like, "I really understand that, but you were on the front row, and we can see you.
Yeah.
This is a relationship, like." We're your show, but you're our show. Mm-hmm. I always remember another woman who she brought a duvet.
What?
Yeah, she was on the front row and practically wearing a duvet, and at one point got her knitting out. And it was, you're like, but then I remember when I did I did a play, and I loved this play so much, talk about the Pride in London, and it's a very moving play, and there was, I'm losing my trail of thought here. There was just so much response to what was happening within the audience, and you kind of that relationship for me was just kind of very powerful. It was a time when gay marriage had just been legalized in England, but then there was all this controversy that was happening in Russia. And there was a protest on Whitehall, just outside of where we were performing, and people were holding these banners "To Russia with Love" on them. And the play was very much about a three-hander between a married couple, heterosexual couple, and the wife knows that her husband is gay, and he never comes to terms with it, even though she desperately wants him to, so that he can be free. He can't, and they never have they never talk about it. And at the end of each night, we would come on and we'd taken banners. My mum had actually taken the banners and given them to us. But we took the banners onto the stage, and the curtain called "To Russia with Love." And there was this lesbian couple from Russia who was sat in the front row, and watching us was kind of, it was so beautiful and so moving, because they held their hands and they were crying through a lot of it. And at the end, they didn't applaud us. They just stood up, they turned to each other, and they embraced. Oh. And they kind of and they were comforting each other, and it's moments like that where you go, oh, this isn't just my job, but I'm doing a play here. Like, you're part of a conversation that is important to people. It can be important to people, and good plays, they stand the test of time because they're saying something that we can still, as human beings, resonate to now and somehow connect with. And I think that those moments for me are really, really powerful as well. Not just the ones where you get your gym bra stuck in your dress, but just yeah.
And obviously, speaking of roles that connect with audiences, the role you might be most associated with right now is Agent Peggy Carter, first in Captain America: The First Avenger. This was the 5th film, I think, in the Marvel universe, and it's so interesting to go back and watch them all and see how smart and steady they were from the beginning. How did you first become aware of this role? And it was at a time when I don't think superhero movies were the norm. They might have been kind of frowned upon, honestly.
Yeah, well, I'd done by then, I mean, I'd done mostly adaptations of books and done a lot of stage work, and yeah, I think I got an audition to go for this. I'd never heard of it. I've never read a comic book in my life.
Still, even?
Yeah. And I think that probably helped because there wasn't any pressure. I didn't really know. I lived in my own little nerdy world, so I wasn't aware necessarily of the size and of these franchises, which I think is probably kind of useful actually. So I went in prepared as I would for any job, and then it was just a round of lots of different auditions. And I remember the last audition was a full day screen test where I was picked up from home at 7 in the morning, taken to Shepperton Studios, put into hair and makeup, and then had to, I think, learn about 8 pages of dialogue. And then they'd employed actors to come in. They'd paid actors to come in just to audition. They weren't auditioning for the show.
Really?
They weren't auditioning for a part in the film. They were paid to audition with me, who was auditioning for the film. It was this whole, and then they had this crew there, and they had the assistant director, and they had like a link to LA, so LA could watch the whole process and ask me questions. And then I was given 20 minutes to learn an unarmed combat fight sequence, and then they wanted me to see how I was loading and unloading guns, if I seemed to be confident enough to know what I was doing. Yeah, and then, I mean, then you just go home and go, well, that was an experience. And then I think around this time I'd done Pillars of the Earth, or so I was going to do press for that or something. Or anyway, and then kind of found out I'd gotten it. And it was great. It was, yeah, of course it was amazing. And so began the training, the physical training, where the first time I worked with Simon Waterson, who was Daniel Craig for, I think, for at least the first Bond's personal trainer.
Oh, really?
And after the first session with him, I turned green, had to go home and threw up, and went into bed and couldn't move for like 2 days. Wow. It was a lot of kind of, high intensity interval training, that sort of thing, which I'm not a fan of. But what I liked about those guys at Marvel, and I still like, otherwise I wouldn't have carried on doing so many. Other than that, I like working, and it's good to earn money to pay bills. That I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna turn it down. But they're really nerdy. They love the comic book world. Yeah. They're like, and then what's gonna happen? And then they've got it all planned out. They're like children, and so their excitement for it is it's contagious, and they kind of, I think they let me do what I want with her. I didn't get much direction. At one point, Joe Johnston was, I think he was enjoying the fact that I can do different takes. So we'd get the take, and then he'd be like, okay, do something else, and now do something else. And you could tell he was enjoying the fact that I, as a trained actor, had learned how to do multiple different choices and different deliveries from which he could then use and decide what he wanted later, and that was really fun. And so I didn't feel like I was kind of a pawn in something that was too scary or intimidating. And I think what I'm most grateful for now, because it's been, like you said, it has been something that's had a kind of a commercial platform, and therefore, especially with younger fans, it's been the character that they've most associated with me, is that she's not over-sexualized, or she's not kind of dark and broken, because she does follow me around quite a bit when I meet someone who loves Peggy or talks to me like I am Peggy. And if she was a character that, she's a wholesome character, and a character that's very current, despite the fact it's set in the 40s. and that's really, I feel very fortunate about that. So I'm allowed. I like talking. I don't mind talking about her. Just not all the time.
I swear only 12 more questions about her and then we'll move on.
One thing I will say though is that during Dry Powder, we got nominated for a Best New Comedy at the Olivier Awards. It had critical acclaim. We got like 5 stars across the board. It was a comedy. It was modern. I got to do a modern play. I played a sociopath. It was so much fun. She would say things like, it's not my fault that you're stupid. And she would go, one of the lines would be, allow less intelligent people to hate you. It is their destiny. And it costs you nothing. She had all these great one-liners. Yeah. Anyway, so I remember one night coming out of the stage door and a guy coming up to me going, hi, well done. Anyway, so the Infinity Stones. What I'm thinking is, because now Thanos, and I'm going, hold on one second, what are you talking about? No context for what are you talking about? Well, because of, and then it took me, and he's like, well, are you going to be in it? And it took me a while to know what he was talking about. I've never heard of Infinity Stones. I hate to say it. I don't know what they are. I don't read comic books. And I wouldn't have been told anyway, because Marvel keep everything so secret. And I was sitting there going like, I've just come off the stage. And I gave it my all. And here we are talking about something I know nothing about. But by the end of it, you could see his face drop and he was like, oh, you really know nothing. I was like, yeah, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. Yeah.
So you can't name the Infinity Stones?
I don't even know what they are. Are they like diamonds? Are they like jewel? Are they?
Well, I
power. See, power. Yeah, okay. We should talk about something else. Yeah. I'm not going to be.
Because I'm showing my ignorance. No, I call them jewels, but then boys get upset with me. They're apparently very powerful stones.
Right.
They're jewels. They're jewels and a pretty bracelet.
They're pretty.
But why do you think this character resonated so much with people? I love. There's a quote I believe you said, quoting another quote, sort of the Ginger Rogers thing.
Yeah.
Where she has to do everything Captain America does backwards in heels.
Yeah, I stole that from her because I thought, oh, that's great. That's really helpful because I was feeling like I wanted to have some sense of ownership of who she was because this was Captain America, a big kind of commercial franchise, and I didn't want to feel too lost or too invisible in that world, I think. So I just made her very strong, very self-contained, and I kind of thought, well, if I can bring out some sort of quality where you believe that she really loved early Steve, that she saw that his frustrations about his limitations of being taken seriously as a soldier is something she could relate to being a woman. That was considered her disability. And from that was able to, for me, be able to then approach it not like I'm in a superhero film, but into having some sort of emotional connection to him and some sort of truth in it. And then I think as it developed, and in the series she was given that line, I know my value, anyone else's opinion doesn't really matter, was something that a lot of people kind of really like, it stuck with. And so I've met people at conventions who name their children Peggy, or have been like my face on their forearm in a permanent tattoo. I'm like, that is insane.
But I'm still quoting you on my
own mother doesn't like me that much. I don't even like myself that much. What do you do? Yeah, and it's lovely. And I suppose I feel with any character you play as an actor, you are for that time a custodian of that character. And if people are connecting, they're connecting to her. They're not connecting to me. They're connecting to something they see in her that they share or that they desire. And that separation is important, I think. When I talk about characters or when I'm rehearsing, I tend to do this thing which Mike Leigh does, which is to talk about your character not in the first person, but to always make them objective, so they're sitting outside of yourself.
Oh, interesting.
So you help build who they are rather than reduce it to who you are and going, I just don't feel that I would do that. My character just wouldn't do that. And just going that, or kind of mumbling in a naturalistic way, thinking, well, that's acting. And it's kind of, but making it something that exists outside of you, then also it creates a healthy boundary, I suppose, when you're meeting people who are so connected to that work, but they're connected to the character. They don't, it's qualities that I've brought to this character, but it's essentially that character is for them, that story is for them. And once you know, I've finished a job, it's not mine anymore, it's for the audience to do what they want with.
One question I promise from the audience about Peggy. Matt Marr?
Oh, that's me.
Hey.
Tattoo.
Do you have a tattoo?
I thought I recognized you.
And I'll warn, there's a spoiler alert, but it seems that Agent Carter is gone from the Marvel Universe. What was the process like saying goodbye to her? Or will we see her again?
Would she just, I wish she would just be left to rest in peace. She died, didn't she? Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't really, like a character that will never die. I love her, of course, I'm very happy, very grateful to her, but I think it's you know, one thing that I wanted, you know, I really wanted variety. It's why I go back and do plays. I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. There's no creativity in that, there's no life in that. And who I was a year ago, luckily, is not who I am today. Like, I'm changing, I'm evolving, I'm growing. I think we get more interesting as time goes by. We have more experience behind us. We know a little bit about what we're doing and maybe can make some more creative choices. And I want the challenges of it. Like, I'm doing Measure for Measure later on this year, and that's so new. I've never done anything like that before. And I'm about to play a plantation owner in 18th century Jamaica who is the opposite of everything I stand for. And that to me is like, that's where I start to kind of feel my heart starts to race a little bit, rather than revisiting something I've already done that was considered loved and popular for the sake of, because it's being popular. You know, I don't want to take away from, you know, the amazing opportunities that I was given to play her, and knowing that you know, a lot of people like her is wonderful, but you know, I want the right to be able to play horrid people, and you know, and completely different people to my own, and to create that range and stretch myself and do jobs that I think I can't do. That's when I know that I want something. Is when I think it's impossible and I can't do it, and I go, oh well, now we have to. It's a bit like when anyone I remember someone challenging, I hate sharks, like I was really scared of sharks, but as soon as someone just went, well, I'm actually booking shark diving on the weekend, but you're too scared to come. I'm like, well, no, I have to come, because the impossible opportunity. that's my slightly masochistic thing of going like, well, I'm gonna have to play that part because I think it's impossible. I think I'm gonna commit social suicide. It'll be the end of my career. Of course, I'm gonna take it. That's kind of the weird. You know, the weird psychology.
Did you go shark diving?
I certainly did.
Oh my God! No. Okay, yeah.
No, but the thing that I'm doing later on this year. So Measure for Measure will be in the West End. But here's a cool thing. Josie Rourke, who's the artistic director of the Donmar Warehouse, who's just directed her first film, Mary, Queen of Scots, with Margot Robbie and Saoirse Ronan, and she's this real powerhouse of a director. She has adapted Measure for Measure. And she talks about it, as many people do, as being a problem play, because it's not a comedy, but it's described as kind of a comedy. And she kind of describes it as like Shakespeare was getting some really great stuff going, and then kind of went, and at the end went, let's just tidy this up and backtrack and go out again. And kind of, it's some elements of it, I think, are very unsatisfying for scholars and for audience members. So what she did is she called me and she went, I've just cut the problem out of it. And so, but here's what she's done. It runs for an hour, set in 1604, original text, but it's just heavily the main plot of Angelo and the novice nun, Isabella. Then we have the interval, and then the audience come back, and we start the play again, but in modern day, and now I'm Angelo, and he's a novice monk. So it's a gender flip. And it means that
Same language?
Same language. And it just means that Jack Loudon and I are going to be learning each other's parts.
Wow.
And I'll say to him day one, I'm like, I'm gonna steal anything. And like, feel free to take anything of mine. I've got plenty, I've got abundance of creativity and choices in there. So, of course, he'll be like, no, I think I'm good. I think you just...
We don't say stealing, we say paying homage.
Paying homage.
Yes, yes.
I will pay homage.
I actually love that play, so this is really
Great,
exciting.
yeah.
But I do recognize the problems in it. One thing that is not a problem script is Howard's End. This is such a beautiful book by Ian Forster. It was previously made into a movie with your old friend Emma Thompson.
Yeah.
Did you talk to her about playing the role?
She did a typical M thing, which is, God, don't watch what I did. You are she and she is you. And she said, if you want to read lots of books on physics. There you go. She said they're so bright, the Schlegel sisters, and their minds are constantly working, and they're ahead of everyone in the room. So just make sure that you're very active in what you're doing. So I just played a lot of heads up. Actually, I didn't read any physics books. But what I loved about that was that you have Kenneth Lonergan, and I'd just seen him at Manchester by the Sea, who had said, I don't want to adapt Howard's End. Here are all the reasons why. And Colin Callender, the producer who runs Playground, went, they are all the reasons why you should. And it just meant that he wasn't reverential or nostalgic or romantic or idealistic about that world and what England looked like. You know, he had problems with the narrative, which was great because he was going to work them out. And it's such a beautiful piece of work, I think, because what Kenny's been able to do with it, he would write it like almost a musical score. So you'd have 5 characters speaking at the same time, as we do when we overlap our loved ones and we finish each other's sentences, and that's a display, an expression of intimacy. We know each other that well. That's what we can do, or that we feel comfortable enough with each other. We'd have to be polite to wait to each other to finish. Like it's all these little characteristics that exist within how families relate to each other. And he would write out kind of each character in columns with slashes of when each other were coming in. So there was one scene where 11 pages where we were 5 characters speaking over each other in this kind of like frisson. And it sounded like an orchestra, you know, like an oboe doing something funky over there while cello is just in the background doing that, and then the saxophonist kind of does. And you're having to play your own part, knowing that you've got to time it right so that you will finish at this bit. It's all kind of geared towards understanding the rhythm, very much. I'm not comparing him to Shakespeare, you can't do that, but you know, the way that Shakespeare's iambic pentameter teaches you how to say it, because there is a very definite rhythm, and the breaks in the rhythm are telling you something about where the character's at. Same thing with Kelly. There's no fat on the script. Everything is there for a reason. And honouring that, even when, you know, Hetty MacDonald, the director, would come up to me and say, he's written a comma there, so should we honour that? And I would go, yeah, I'm going to honour it. I'm going to honour the shit out of that comma. Roll those cameras. Watch this. But it was once you kind of, rather than reducing it to the way that I spoke, with the inflection always being there, you realise that what Margaret was doing would be kind of going up in there and coming back down, and then coming over here again, and then actually coming full circle and being here. And all this, and that created, each character had a different rhythm of speaking, which was true to them. And that level of specificity meant that there was no time for kind of stiff period drama acting. We'd done this thing where we found all these photographs in this archive this guy had of Edwardian, particularly women, slightly blurred photographs, because obviously back then they'd had to remain still for a long time in order to get a focused shot. And you think, oh, maybe did we then see these photos and just imagine that people just were like that all the time? And just kind of staring wistfully out into landscapes and dreaming and stuff. And that we weren't aware that they moved, really.
Yeah.
And so having these blurred pictures of women striding down the street, books in hand, cigarettes, laughing, joking, arm in arm, hands behind their heads, even though they had a corset, and you think, oh, they could actually move quite well. And seeing them running, and it just meant that we wanted to breathe as much life into it as possible. So it just happened to be the period was the backdrop, but that there were very human characters in that. And that's kind of what we set out to do. And I think it helped that, like I said before, Hetty would rehearse each scene like a play. So we'd physically figure out what we wanted to do. And we had the art department say, what in the book do you know that your character really likes, that you want us to put into these scenes, into your drawing room, into the living room. So I said, well, Margaret is all about letters. So let's have lots of letters and books and stationery. And so, of course, you'd open up Margaret's prop desk and there'd be letters in there. And you'd open up the letters and you'd realize that the art department had they'd actually written letters, like between Aunt Julie and Tibby. And it was all the detail was in there. And then you had Helen, played by Pippa Coulthard, wanting, you know, beautiful kind of shawls and watercolours. That was very Helen, and kind of romance and kind of floaty numbers. And then you had Tibby, played by Alex Lawther, who wanted his fossil collection. And so you were able to kind of inhabit these worlds rather than turn up, say your mark, in a naturalistic kind of cool way. And that's acting, and then you can go home. You had to. The work is so rich, and it's better than you. That's the other thing that I think why I probably end up why I do costume dramas, because they're based on a book or they're based on something that, so there was a literary interest there, so the writing is revered, and the stage work, the writing is revered, and so it's better than me, so and therefore it challenges me to go to it rather than just kind of like reduce the acting to just, you know, that sort of back-footedness of just kind of saying it in a naturalistic way. I don't like to work like that. I want to see something and go, how do I get to that? How do I get to Margaret Schlegel? What's going on with Therese Racan that she can do that? How is Head a Trap? What does that look like? What does it feel like? How does that manifest in the way that she walks around a table to get to her cup of tea? You know, those things that are, if they're on the page, then they stimulate my mind to ask all these questions. And then I'm not thinking about my performance or trying to reduce it to who I am. It's taking me out of myself and walking towards it, and walking towards something that is a craft, you know?
Margaret also feels like a very modern character, even in a story that's told quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's interesting. She feels very modern and current.
Bit of an original thinker, given the fact that she'd been self-educated and she didn't have rights we share today. But one thing I loved about her is she has this at the beginning, this friendship, this kinship with this woman, Ruth Wilcox. And they don't quite understand why they like each other, but they just do, because they're so different. And at one point, you know, Margaret, she's a liberal, she's, you know, fights for women's suffrage, and she's intellectual, and she lives in the world of ideas and philosophy and social reform. And Ruth Wilcox at lunch goes, well, I'm just relieved that women don't have the vote. I think we should leave that up to the men. And you see kind of Margaret kind of going, what? Pardon? What? And you think, oh, well, then that's the end of that relationship then, clearly, or they're going to have a fight or something. And they turn towards each other. They're fascinated with each other's differences. What I loved about Margaret is that the whole tagline of the book, you know, it's in the title kind of page, and it's something she says later is only connect. And what Margaret does so brilliantly is the start, when someone disagrees with her values, her opinions, her ideas, that is the beginning of a conversation and a relationship, not the end of one. And I think we live now, today I see it, and I myself am guilty of it, where living in our kind of righteous memes and statements and sound bites, and being, you know, people having extreme views and being very black and white, and kind of, you know, fearful of having our point of view being attacked in any way. That it just means that we're disengaging from each other. And Margaret would kind of sit there and want to have a chat with a staunch Republican. I would be really fascinated to know what they think about stuff.
That is very modern.
I'm not going to get controversial, but you know what I mean. Like you know, and I was like, oh, I love her for that. I think that's really cool. She's expansive.
Yeah. We were almost out of time, but there's one question that keeps coming up a lot, and it's not what's your favorite Infinity Stone.
Emerald.
I think that's power.
Time.
I should know that one.
Which we're running out of.
Yes. So, look at how beautiful that comes back. People want to know if there's a role you're dying to play.
Yes. I want to play Iago.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there are ways to do it where you don't change the language that much, but it's absolutely plausible that Iago could be a woman. One of the first lines he says, and by my troth I'm as good as any man. And you know, he feels that he should have been promoted and it was his place, but you know, he's not, and that leads to his own resentment. You know, I know what that's like. You know, and I think also his love for Othello could be her love for Othello. You know, I mean, I haven't thought about it too much, a bit simplistic, but I'd love to play those roles. Yeah,
I love that
I'd love
idea.
a bash at all the classics, really. That's the impossible ones, yeah.
You'll get to them eventually. But first up, Measure for Measure.
Yes.
Yes, which, can you tell us when that starts?
Yeah, so I rehearse end of August and it opens 24th of September and goes on till the end of November.
That's my birthday.
Well, it's meant to be.
Yeah, clearly. That's how I'll celebrate. Well, again, I want to congratulate you on such a fantastic career. And please, if you haven't seen Howard's End, I assume you have, you can watch it on Stars still or on the BBC app, I believe. But it's fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys for being a great audience.
Thank you very much.